Good day, friends. Again, a huge privilege chatting to you, and it's so special. I'm sitting here in a Semillon vineyard. And the vineyards don't look great this time of the year because the leaves are dropping, and within the next 2 or 3 weeks, all the leaves will be off and they will go in full dormancy. And then in June, we will start pruning them, and then the vine will literally look like it's dead. And in September, suddenly there's a sign of life, and it start budding, and then the new season is there. And I hope like this sort of dormancy and new season, I hope it's more or less the same as the crisis we're in with the virus. I hope it can move away, and by the time there's a new season, we can be over this and can start selling wine and move back to normal conditions. If you hear some noises in the background, it's some geese here that's chatting with me, and it's really a privilege chatting to you. What are we doing in the winery? It's still a skeleton staff. We are busy preparing wines for bottling, and very exciting. On Monday we'll bottle the first 2020 wines. It's a Viognier, also a Pinotage from 2019. Both wines are looking amazing, and by Wednesday next week we'll start bottling a 2019 Brut from the Grendel. So that is a wine that's dry, lying in tank now for a while, and from Monday we'll start preparing and sort of dissolving sugar in it and prepare a yeast, and by Wednesday we will be ready. We'll fill it and close it with a crown cap, and the fermentation will take place in the bottle. Few words on this year's vintage. I always joke to say uneven years is always better, of course, than even years, but it's purely sort of speculation. There's nothing scientific in that. But I must say this year I changed my opinion, because 2020 looked excellent. If you look at the total production in South Africa, it's around 1.3 million tons made by 546 wineries, and a total of plantings in South Africa is between 94,000 and 95,000 hectares. Sadly, vineyards just in my time, in my 33 years, went down from 106,000 hectares to the current situation of 94,000. I can't remember exactly the hectares, and that is purely due to financial pressure, and grape growers, smaller ones, has fallen away and sold their farms to bigger producers, and some vineyards was uprooted and replanted with vegetables, or purely fall under development and real estate development, many times close to the ocean or around special places. But here at the Grendel, I must say we uproot some vineyards with the changing in of the guard here. When Sir de Villiers Graaf passed away sadly about 4 or 5 years ago, de Villiers, his son, took over, and we uproot quite a bit of vineyards and we replant quite a bit. So we have a big sort of plantings of Merlot and Sauvignon Blanc. That's our 2 biggest lines on the farm. Now, looking at the physical site of the grapes, we do quite a bit of weighing. I have a dedicated student in harvest time that do quite a few jobs for me, drawing samples in the vineyard and crushing the grapes in a bucket and squeezing it and crushing it with a fist, or his or her fist, and putting it through a sieve for analysis and tasting the juice. But also, when the fruit arrive, taking berries from different clusters and weighing clusters itself, taking randomly from different bins and taking berries from that clusters and weighing the berries. And it's fascinating. We harvest the Cabernet vineyards from Somerset West that form the backbone of our Rubaiyat, our Bordeaux blend, our flagship. And the berries in some vintages weigh 1 gram per berry. Friends, that is really minute. If that is an indication, if I can show you that, where a Sauvignon Blanc berry and cluster can weigh up to 220 grams, and a berry can weigh anything from 2 grams to 2.5 grams. So that is just something on berry weight and how areas differ from one another. And of course, the big contribution to the weight of a berry and the size of the cluster is a good budding in the middle of the year. And also, of course, if the vineyard is dry land or irrigated, of course, dry land conditions is always the berry will weigh lighter and is smaller, where in our case supplementary irrigation vineyards, the clusters tend to be slightly bigger, and the berries of course will weigh more, and there's a bit more juice, as simple as that. We also buy in fruit from a vineyard in Ceres that belonged to Pieter Graaf, and he's got such a capable team of managing the vineyards, and our Chardonnay and Pinot Noir is from there referred to as Oppieberg Chardonnay and Oppieberg on the mountain Pinot Noir. And that is ideal conditions. It's continental conditions, where our conditions here on the farm is much more maritime, where the ocean influenced that, and temperatures are much more mild and moderate, where continental conditions 960 meters above sea level. In driving it's about an hour 50 minutes to 2 hours. That vineyards are growing there, and sometimes in winter there's even snow covering the soil, not the vines like in Europe, but of course in winter like I mentioned earlier, the vines are in dormancy. But it's so special to think of a vineyard where the soil is covered under snow, although it's just for a few days. And we do amazing, because the vineyards are moving towards maturity. They are now 7, 8, 9 years old, and the wines are really start putting up their hands, the Chardonnay and the Pinot Noir. Friends, there was a question a while ago from one of the patrons to ask, what is the difference between an addition and a fining? As simple as that. And of course, an addition, if you just sort of add a small dash of acid or sulfur, or even in some cases we don't do that, a dash of sweetness in the form of grape concentrate, that I will say is an addition to improve the mouthfeel or the analysis or the longevity or the richness of the wine. Where refining is something like bentonite, where we add it to take out the protein. So it's something you add that don't necessarily contribute to the chemical composition, but to stabilize the wine. In my opinion, that is an addition. And now there I refer to a product like Vegicol, that's a protein we add, and then afterwards bentonite that will take out the haziness and to make sure the wine is clear and filtered, and clear to be filtered for bottling. Yeah, I did mention the hectares. It's amazing to think of that. The wine industry in South Africa is now 361 years old. I don't think there's a lot of wine industries in the world that went through the turmoil like we did, keeping in mind things like apartheid, where for a long time South African wines was a no on the world market, and today we are privileged to sell on the national level, and it's so exciting to see our products in America, and for that matter all over the world. I did mention there's 546 wineries, and of course this figure changed as wineries close down, and we hope not too many close down during this crisis time in the world. And of course there's new wineries that pop up every now and then, so I don't think the 546 wineries is exactly spot on. It varies slightly. And just something interesting, there's 2 places where winemakers study in South Africa. The one is Elsenburg. I'm a proud old student of Elsenburg. And then of course the University of Stellenbosch, and my assistant here, Morgan Stein, he studied at Stellenbosch. And of course there's always this joke, which one is the best, and of course everybody will always back their old place where they study. But it's amazing, and there's such a great camaraderie between winemakers in South Africa. I look at a figure 2-3 years ago, and I work out there must be the best part of 960, 970 winemakers in South Africa that study. And like I mentioned, some study at Elsenburg and some at Stellenbosch. And we will joke with one another, but if we really sit down in a tasting or a discussion, there's wonderful camaraderie, and I don't know of any winemaker that's not prepared to help an older one or even a younger one. Talking of vintages, some people ask, Charles, what is the definition of a great vintage? And of course it's got a lot to do with weather conditions. So the older winemakers in South Africa that have more experience than me will say that 2015 is seen as the best vintage ever in the history after 361 years in this country, as the best vintage. I'm also a great fan of 2017. 2020 and 19 is still early days. The 19 wines has just been transferred from barrels, so difficult to make a judgment on that. 2020 show a lot of potential. I'm also a fan of 13 wines that is slightly more feminine. And going back to my second year at the Grendel, 2007 was an absolutely superb year. More difficult years 2018, 11, 14, 16. But the great thing about this country, and I've been making wine here for 33 years, we never had a complete disaster like people in Europe and other parts in the world experience. So in my time, I've never worked in a vintage where we crush half of the fruit or 30% down. We have bigger crops and smaller crops, better quality, cooler conditions, warmer conditions. But the definition for me of a great vintage is if your vines have moist, if there's moisture in the soil, your vines grow well. And from veraison, and veraison, friends, is a term that we say in Afrikaans, deurslaan, when the berries start changing in color. In the case of red berries, the berry become red, of course, or black. And in the case of white grapes, the hard green berry change slightly yellowish, or sort of change in color and become softer, and you can take a berry from the cluster and chew it and eat that. That means the process of veraison. Here on this farm, that's around Christmas, between Christmas and New Year. And if you can have 45 days from there till picking, if I can use an average, of course, varieties ripen at different times, but 45 days is for me a good average. That means the second half of February. If you can have mild, moderate conditions in that time with the support of moist and nothing drastical and no heat waves or radical weather conditions, then all the signs are there of producing exceptional wines. Friends, it's so great chatting to you here in the vineyard, and I think for many people up country it's not always privileged to be in a vineyard, and it's so tranquil and relaxed this time of the year. And of course it can be so busy and hectic in harvest time when there's 30 or 40 people picking fruit. It's really amazing. Like I mentioned, there's frozen food available from our restaurant. It's fantastic. It will be delivered to you in this region around the Grendel in a radius, and it will be available on food.thegrendel.co.za. You can order it, and as time, if over time we will increase the area where we will deliver, and eventually hopefully can cover the whole of Cape Town. Thank you very much. Great chatting to you.